everyone. I'm Angela Delita, your co host for the Plant Based Asia Summit. This afternoon, I am very excited to introduce you to a remarkable woman who is on a mission to make sustainable fashion mainstream. Vinita Turakhia is the founder and creative director of Genuinely Not Leather, a Hong Kong based ethical fashion brand using sustainable fabrics such as cork, dried teak leaves, and recycled plastic to create beautiful handbags and fashion accessories. Today, she'll be speaking to us about a topic which I believe needs to be exposed and talked about much more for its negative effects on the environment, not to mention animal and worker welfare, the leather industry. Welcome, Vinita, and thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very well, Angela. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for creating an event such as the Plant-Based Asia Summit to raise awareness on a plant-based lifestyle within Asia for both health and sustainability reasons. I think this was so essential. So thank you so much for having me on this event and for creating it.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinita. We're so happy that you're here from Hong Kong today. So let's jump straight in with the questions. Firstly, can you tell us about your work at Genuinely Not Leather? What exactly led to the creation of your teak leaf handbags and accessories?
Great. So for me, Angela, genuinely not leather is just not a handbag brand. It is a culmination of my beliefs and philosophies on various aspects in life. So I decided to move to a vegan lifestyle after my daughter was born. You know, the visuals I saw on social media about the practices within the dairy industry and the way the animals were being treated just didn't sit well with me. I couldn't reconcile to the fact that I was making a choice to breastfeed my child while taking away that very right from another being. And that is where my journey began. And while I was transitioning, not just my diet, but also various aspects of my life to move to a plant based lifestyle, I began looking for accessories that use alternatives to leather in creating them. And I found that most of the alternatives available were made using polyurethane, which in itself is a derivative of crude oil, and the process for manufacturing it is not particularly environmentally friendly. Also, around the same time, in my area of work, I began leading on modern slavery policy, and that made me aware of the horrors of the fast fashion industry. I came to realize that. A product is never cheap. Someone somewhere is paying for it, and that was where the idea of creating something that would bring together the ideals of being cruelty free, of being environmentally friendly, and of being ethically made came to being. And that's how I created GNL. All of these products, I try to minimize the use of polyurethane. So I make bags using dried teak leaves, recycled plastic, and cork. I love the cork fabric because it's made by harvesting the bark of a cork tree, of an oak tree, which is over 25 years old. And when the bark is harvested, the tree actually absorbs more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, thus making the whole process very environmentally friendly. Um, what I also do is to reduce the carbon footprint of these products further. I plant one tree for every sale that I make, and that sort of helps me keep reduce the carbon footprint of the products. So yeah, for me, this is a philosophy of being sustainable, being cruelty free, and standing for something that is ethically made. So when you choose to wear a product, I would highly recommend that you choose a product that is a culmination of these aspects, because I think they're very important for each individual to know.
Okay, so Vinita, let's talk about the leather industry itself. So the general understanding is that leather is a byproduct of the meat industry, but you claim this is not the case. Can you please explain this in more detail?
Yeah, sure. So Angela, I think leather is not just a byproduct of the meat industry, but it is a profitable trade in itself. The global leather industry in 2020 was valued at 394 billion US dollars, and that is massive for if you for a by you know if you think leather is a byproduct of the meat industry, that's a massive industry to have from a byproduct. But I'd like to delve into reasons why I do not believe this is a byproduct. The first being the low profitability of the meat trade itself. Now, the way the slaughterhouses work, and what I understand, is that the profit per head of cattle from the meat itself is very low. It's around 3 US dollars per head of cattle. If a slaughterhouse was to sustain on this level of profitability, it would be rather unsustainable to continue. What brings the profit is actually the trade in the skins. That is where the money is coming from. So while one may say that an animal is being slaughtered primarily for meat and the skin is just a byproduct, what is keeping the slaughterhouses running is actually the trade in this product, which is why I think, sorry, calling the skin a byproduct of meat might be incorrect. It can at best be described as a co-product of meat because it is being sold at a higher profit eventually. The other reason that I believe leather is not a byproduct of the meat industry is while cow hide is the most popular skin that is used in leather manufacture, it is not the only skin that is used in leather manufacture. Any animal with a skin can be a victim to the leather industry. So dogs, cats, goats, pigs, sheep, rabbits, seals, lambs, stingrays, horses, deer, snakes, alligators, elephants, sharks, etc. All of these animals have their skin taken away because it is of value to the leather industry. Is there meat of equal value to the meat industry? I'm not sure. For example, in exotic leather trades such as ostrich skins, the value of the skin is 4 times the value of the meat. I think, therefore, it's incorrect to say that the skin is the byproduct of the industry. Also, Angie, if you look at the largest leather producers of the world, in 2020 by volume, China exported about 25% of the world's leather. This was followed by Brazil, Russia, India. Now, some of these countries are where the meat is eaten, but the others are where the animals are slaughtered predominantly for their skins. So that is another reason why I believe that leather is not just a byproduct of the meat industry. And my final argument is based on my observations of what is happening around us today and just anecdotal evidence from talking to people. So we've read, the impact of COVID on the meat industry itself, and it's all over the news, the adverse impact COVID has had on the meat industry in Portugal, USA, Germany, Australia. All of these countries have had meat sales impacted because people are moving away from meat consumption. But the leather industry is a different story altogether. So, if you read research, the leather industry has experienced a disruption because of COVID, but this is not expected to continue going forward. A lot of analysts believe that the leather industry is expected to grow at a rate of 6% from now up to 2028. So, in a scenario where meat sales are declining, but the leather demand for leather is going up, can we continue to believe that leather would be a byproduct then? And this is a question, I keep asking myself, and we will see how the future unfolds. But I think we have enough reason to believe that leather in the future is increasingly going to be the main reason why animals are slaughtered, while meat is going to then be a byproduct.
Thank you, Vinita. That actually shocked me, the statistic you shared, that the leather industry is expected to grow by 6% per year.
Yes, and this is not just one research report, Angie, but various reports believe the same, and it's driven by rising disposable incomes, change in fashion trends, and also the fact that leather traditionally has this very aspirational value to it. So if you've gone, if you shop, and I've done this many times where I've gone to shop and products presented to me have been leather products. And when I've asked for non-leather products, I've always been told, oh, so you want something cheaper. And I need to remind the shopkeeper that I am not looking for a cheaper alternative. I am looking for an alternative that is cruelty free and environmentally friendly. But this is not a concept that's widely recognized. And so I think it's very, very important that we are having this conversation today. And I hope these conversations and discussions continue, because people need to disassociate themselves from that aspirational value that we've built for leather over the years. It will take time, but the more we discuss and the more we spread and raise awareness on this issue, I think the more people will adapt to this change.
Yes, I hope so as well, Vinita. But let's actually get into why this is why is the leather industry actually bad for the environment and people. So animal rights organization PETA says that leather is worse than meat. So can you please explain how this is true? What exactly has to happen to a cow skin before it can be turned into a handbag or a pair of shoes?
So, we all know of the environmental impact that raising cattle has on the earth and on the environment around us. But unfortunately, in the case of leather, this environmental impact doesn't end with the slaughter of the animal. Because to make that piece of skin into a handbag or into a shoe or into a belt, there are lots of processes that need to be undertaken, which leave a footprint on the environment as well. For example, for processing 1 ton of hide, you need approximately 30 to 40 cubic meters of water. To put this in perspective, 1 cubic meter is 1000 liters. And to process 1 ton of animal leather, you're using therefore 30 to 40,000 liters of water. On an average, when you look at people, Angie, every person is generally wearing 4 leather items at once, right from your shoes to your purse to your belt to your wallet. And I read some fascinating examples, which I would like to quote here, on how many animals are needed to produce those products. So, to make your car interior and your car upholstery, you need around 4 to 15 cows per car. So, you need skin from 4 to 15 cows. Footballs that are made from leather, there are 35,000 kangaroos that are killed per year to make this. To make your soccer shoes, there are around 6 million kangaroos that are killed per year. Alligator purses, those that love these animal print purses, you need 4 to 5 alligator bellies to make one purse. and all of these skins need to be processed, and the amount of water need to be process these skins is in itself not sustainable for the environment. It is massive. And then once this water is used, it is, it's not just disposed of as water. Uh, the process of tanning is essentially done to convert protein within these skins into something that does not react to bacterial action. So what happens is when you get the cow skin from from the slaughterhouse, that skin is biodegradable. That skin is susceptible to bacterial action. And to make that skin durable and to make that skin something that will last for generations, a process called tanning needs to be undertaken. Tanning converts the protein into from this skin. It changes the chemical composition of this protein into something that will not react to bacteria from air, that will stop the biodegradability of leather, of that skin. Else, your leather bag or your shoes would rot in your closet. And the tannery, in doing this, uses a lot of chemicals and generates a lot of waste. Tannery effluents include formaldehyde, acids, chromium, cyanide, sulfur, and more than 30 other highly toxic chemicals that are harmful to living beings and the environment. Most of the leather tanning facilities are existing in countries where environmental norms are lax. So these effluents are not treated before disposing them off into our freshwater bodies or into marine water. And what happens is then this seeps into the underground water, and the cycle comes back to affect humans. So, the first reason, just to recap, Angie, I believe leather is worse than meat is because of its environmental impact. The second reason why I believe so is because of the impact it has on humans. When this water seeps into the underground water systems, which then comes back to us as fresh water, and we consume it, unknowingly these chemicals are coming into our systems. I read while I was researching on the ill effects of leather, I read that the Center for Disease Control in the US found that the incidence of leukemia among residents of a particular that lived near a particular tannery in Kentucky was 5 times higher than the US average. Arsenic, which is a common tannery chemical, has for long been associated with cancer in the workers exposed to these chemicals, which is not the best situation to be in or work in. India is also the fourth largest leather exporter to the world, and most of the tanning of this leather happens in a city called Kanpur, which is located on the banks of the river Ganges. This city is home to over 400 tanneries, and an operation by an NGO within this region found that about 160 to 170 million liters of tannery sewage is disposed of into this river and is not treated. It was really shocking for me to read, and there's a video on YouTube which actually interviews people living around these tanneries, where they talk about the smell that they have got used to since birth, this pungent smell in the air. They talk about the respiratory and digestive ailments that people living around this area face. They talk about birth defects in some cases. So, the argument that leather is a byproduct and therefore it's more sustainable would hold true if we use the skin as it is. But the processes that we are undertaking to convert that skin into something that we would love to use and we would love to carry with pride is just so harmful to those that are using that are undertaking these processes, that I, as a conscious consumer, would not want to use it. And of course, Angie, the third aspect is the cruelty that is associated with this industry. It is true for the meat industry as well, but I'm not sure how many people know that most of the softest and most price, the leathers that cost the most come from newborn or even unborn calves that are in most cases taken out of their mother's wombs and immediately slaughtered for using their skins. As a mom, this just, it makes me feel so miserable because I think any species, that bond between the mother and the child is just so deep, and it's so unfair for us to take that away just because we want to carry a soft handbag or we want to wear a soft belt or have a softer wallet. I think it's just so unfair. So that's the other reason why I believe that leather is worse than meat. It has an environmental impact, it has a human impact, and in most cases, the way we extract this leather for our own use is absolutely cruel and not acceptable.
I was aware that people used calf skin, but I wasn't aware that it was sometimes actually taken out of the mother's womb. I mean, that's horrific, as both you and I are both mothers, and many of our attendees, I'm sure, mothers. And this is also all the chemicals you were saying that goes into it. I mean, cyanide and arsenic, it's just pure poison. And I guess that's actually the smell when you go into, I mean, people say they're addicted to the smell of leather. They go into a shop, but actually, I guess the smell is actually just pure chemicals.
Angie, when I was reading and researching on this topic, I came across something very interesting. So, in the ancient times, if you go back to where leather originated and how it originated, we were hunters and we killed food, and then we found um, a use to the skin that came out and that we couldn't consume. It was used to carry water from long distances, and so that leather, that skin was used as a container to move water. And most of the processes that were undertaken to convert this skin into a non-porous product that could be used to transfer water from one place to another were undertaken outside of the limits of the town, or the inhabited area where the population lived, because the smell that came out of the process of converting the skin into a usable product was just so foul. And it was done by the less privileged sections of society, and that's shocking to me, because I think it also brings out this aspect of how we as society have evolved, and how things that were not considered to smell good or look good were immediately moved out of the inhabited areas to a section where people didn't live, and the less privileged sections of society were expected to undertake these tasks, which I think in itself is so unfair. So, the whole evolution, the way this industry has evolved, I think a lot of things can be questioned on the way people were treated, the way workers are being treated now. A lot of the practices are questionable.
This is an extremely important conversation to be having, I think. So, Vinita, let's continue on to the ecological problem. So leather has the greatest impact on what we call eutrophication. Now, this is a very serious ecological problem in which runoff waste creates an overgrowth of plant life in water systems, which actually suffocates animals by depleting oxygen levels in the water and is the leading cause of hypoxic zones, also known as dead zones. Vinita, can you please explain this, along with the other negative effects the leather industry has on the environment and on society?
Sure, Angie. So before getting into this question, I'd like to spend a few minutes on what eutrophication actually is. I'm not sure it's a word that's commonly used or that our attendees might be aware of, but I'm sure it's a phenomena that most of us have witnessed. When we've gone out and we look at water bodies, most of us would have witnessed this green growth on water, this blanket of green, and nobody really goes near that water. That water is completely stagnant. That is eutrophication, and that happens when water that is rich in nitrogen and phosphorus is pumped untreated into our freshwater systems. What happens is, because of the presence of nitrogen, phosphorus, and other chemicals, uh, algae blooms are triggered in this water. And these algae blooms, because of the process of photosynthesis, use up all of the oxygen that's available in the water for themselves. There's nothing left for the animal and other plant life that exists below the surface of the water, and so that automatically ceases to exist because of the lack of oxygen. Uh, when that happens, we have dead zones, because the life underwater is very important to keep the water alive. But when that ceases to exist, the water kind of becomes dead. And that is a serious problem that we are facing because of various reasons. One is, and I'll touch on this very briefly. One is because of the use of fertilizers on land. Fertilizers contain nitrogen and phosphorus, and when it rains, the rainwater carries away all of these chemicals into your freshwater sources and causing eutrophication. The other reason why eutrophication happens is because when sewage is untreated and is disposed of into fresh and marine water, it triggers eutrophication. Now, to understand how the leather industry contributes to eutrophication, we need to go back to the time when the skins are extracted immediately after animal slaughter. This, Angie, is not as simple as peeling off a carrot, because when the skin is extracted, there is some amount of flesh, there is some amount of hair that is attached to the skin. The skin, therefore, needs to be treated to dehair it, to take off this flesh from it. And this process uses chemicals that triggers eutrophication. There are various chemicals, like I mentioned earlier, that trigger you that are used in the process of tanning. There are various fungicides used to prevent fungal growth on the skin. Again, sulfites, cyanides, and amines used to remove hair, natural grease, fat that is prevalent in that skin, and also to bring the collagen in the skin to a level that it could be tanned, that it can get satisfactory tannage. All of these operations cause water to become rich in these chemicals that trigger eutrophication. The environmental and health impacts of this process, including eutrophication, have been nothing sort of catastrophic. And various individuals over time have tried, and organizations have tried to measure and accurately, analyze the environmental impacts of leather. It starts with the birth of an animal and then feeding that animal in order to bring it up to a particular size and a particular stage of development that you would consider appropriate then to slaughter and for the skin to be used. So it starts with that stage, and because of this belief that leather is a byproduct of meat, it is debatable, and Angie, on how much of this impact should be attributable to the leather industry, how much of it should be attributable to the meat industry. And while we can continue these debates, the fact that our planet is slowly and gradually dying because of these processes holds true. So while one industry can blame another industry and say that no, we account for a very small portion of it because we are just a byproduct, etc., etc., is not going to stop this impact. And one of the key developments that have happened recently is the approval of the environment. Is the envir- sorry, is the approval of the product environment footprint category rules by the European Union's Environmental Footprint Steering Committee. This is considered a defining piece of work because it accurately gives you the impact categories that you need to consider while you look at the environmental footprint of any product. Now, very often, when we talk about the environmental footprint of leather, we talk about climate change, we talk about the carbon footprint of a product. But one needs to understand that there are 16 impact categories that make up the environmental footprint of any particular product. And climate change or carbon footprint is just one of them. There are other often overlooked aspects, such as freshwater and marine eutrophication, freshwater and marine toxicity, the particulate matter that comes out of processes, ionizing radiation, water, metal, and fossil depletion. And leather as a product has an impact on most of these categories, and that is what we need to understand as consumers of that product, and that is what we need to control. While I said polyurethane, which is the most commonly available vegan leather, is not particularly environmentally friendly, its carbon footprint is still one third that of animal leather. So even if people choose to use a bag that's made from polyurethane versus animal leather, you are still helping reduce your carbon footprint by doing that. Yeah, so leather has far reaching impacts, much more than what we can imagine. And if any of our attendees want to delve further or deeper into this subject, there is loads of information available that is for free. It's not chargeable research, and it's available online. I can, Angie, share with you later the links to these research papers, and maybe you could share it as a footnote if our attendees are interested in researching further on this topic to make their own decisions on whether or not to use leather. I'd be really happy to share them with you. I think one, and this is something I want to touch upon because the more I interact with customers in my store and otherwise about alternatives to leather, one of the topics that gets discussed very often is biodegradability. And it's pointed out to me more often than not that vegan alternatives to leather are not biodegradable, while leather is biodegradable, and therefore the environmental impact of leather is not as severe as its vegan alternative, because it will biodegrade if you throw your leather bag away, or your old upholstery away. And this is something I would like to very quickly talk about today. We've discussed the process of tanning. We've discussed how this entire process of tanning is undertaken to stop leather from rotting. So the to stop the cow's skin from rotting, I should not say leather, to stop the skin from decomposing, from degrading, from rotting. Every tannery that undertakes this process has its own way. I mean, while there is a broad process defined, but the individual processes differ from tannery to tannery. The reason this is done is to stop that biodegradability. Tanning alters the protein in the animal's skin to make it less susceptible to bacterial action, to make it durable, and to ensure that this skin will not decompose. Therefore, the argument that leather is naturally biodegradable doesn't hold. The skin is 100% biodegradable. The skin, if you were going to use the skin of the animal as is without any further processing, yes, it is biodegradable. If you are going to process that skin to alter the protein in the skin to make it less susceptible to bacterial action and decomposition, is that piece of fashion that you, or fashion accessory that you're using biodegradable? It's highly questionable. And therefore, if somebody is buying this accessory with a belief that I am buying something that's environmentally friendly and biodegradable, please ask the brand that you're buying it from, what are the processes that have been undertaken to make this product the way it is, and has that altered the biodegradability of the product. I think it's very, very important for people to understand this difference. Leather is not cow skin. Leather is not alligator skin. Leather is not snake skin. Leather is a processed fabric. Leather is something that comes out of processing these skins. You are not using the skin itself as a fashion accessory or as your household product. So please ask these questions and then make your decision.
Thank you, Vinita. We have time, I think, for one more question. So I'd like to ask, firstly, how can the leather industry evolve, and what steps can our attendees take to ensure their fashion choices are more ethical and environmentally sustainable?
Angie, the leather industry is evolving. So, this process of tanning that I mentioned traditionally was done using chromium. A lot of tanneries now are moving to vegetable based tanning. They are trying to change their processes, treat effluents accurately, treat effluents correctly before disposing of the water. But it's dependent on the country where that tannery is located. And to me, the statistics show that most tanneries are located in countries where environmental norms are lax. So it is up to the individual tannery and the government to work together to make this happen, to make this change happen. And that comes when you put your environmental benefit or environmental friendliness over your profit. Even if these processes are undertaken, the fact still remains that the key input to this tannery is coming from a source that does have a very high environmental impact, which makes me very excited about the developments in the alternative to leather industry or alternative fabric industry. There are a lot of products being developed using different technologies. So there is mycelium or mushroom leather that is being developed by growing mushrooms, which has a very similar look and feel to leather. There are various mechanical and chemical processes being applied to resources available to us to make leather like fabric. So, the teak leaf fabric that I use to make these bags is a result of mechanical and chemical processes applied to teak leaves. We have leather being made from cactus plants that also applies mechanical chemical processes to that cactus plant to create leather. Peanutex, which is leather that is leather like fabric developed from pineapples, is another example of this process. But what I think, Angie, is going to be game changing in this space is the commercialization of cell based leather. And this technology is still under development as we speak, but it is about creating the same piece of leather in a lab. So you have the exact same fabric with the same durability, same softness, same flexibility, minus the environmental impact and the cruelty. So that I think is going to be groundbreaking, and I am very, very excited about these developments. Um, Very quickly to your next question on what customers should do or what our attendees should do to ensure their fashion choices are sustainable. Ask questions. Ask questions before you consume or before you choose to buy. I always say this, I own a brand, but I never encourage overconsumption. Do not buy if you absolutely must. And if you choose to buy, choose the most sustainable alternative out there and don't take a brand's word for it. Ask the right questions. What has gone into making this product? Where has this product come from? How have the workers been treated? What is the environmental impact? I think the more you ask, the more sustainable your choices will be.
Yes, so ask questions. That's very good advice, Vinita. And it's also very, very exciting to know that there is such a thing as cell-based leather coming soon. That's fascinating.
I was fascinated when I read about it. So, you talk about cell based meat. There's so much of media coverage given to cell based meat and to, the alternatives to meat. I think the leather industry is going to catch up sooner or later because the developments within the meat industry and the move to plant-based lifestyle is going to encourage alternatives to leather as well, and it's only a matter of time for us to get there.
Yeah, it's a nice way to end, Vinita, on a positive note. So thank you. Thank you so much for meeting me this afternoon from Hong Kong, and thank you for sharing your knowledge, your insights on the topic of leather and sustainability. And I wish you all the best with Genuinely Not Leather. And yeah, I look forward to grabbing one of those beautiful handbags for myself one day. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vinita.
Thank you so much, Angie. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck with the rest of the summit. Thank you.